Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another incredible guest. He is a Vanderbilt University Law School graduate and works as the head of appellate practice at Arnold Itkin. He's held past positions as an assistant United States attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas and as an associate at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher LLP. I am very excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Andrew Gould. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
I'm good, Nate. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Andrew. Thank you for asking me. But before we get started, Andrew, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, you actually gave a lot of the introduction there. But so my name is Andrew Gould. As you said, I lead the appellate practice at Arnold and Itkin. We are a plaintiff's law firm based in Houston, Texas. Though we try cases nationwide. And I have been an appellate lawyer for pretty much, all of my legal career, ever since leaving law school. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. This is the area that I thought I wanted to pursue leaving law school, and it's the area I did pursue leaving law school. And I've been very fortunate to have been able to make a career out of it and working in this field of law for, again, since I graduated.
Well, that sounds wonderful because that is something I actually never see on this podcast. But we got to go all the way back.
Please.
Go all the way back to 2007. But first, I want to go back to 2006 because I saw something interesting. You actually were a summer intern at the office of Senator Mitch McConnell, who is like the third or fourth most powerful person in this country. So I have to ask, how was working with him? That's so interesting.
It was great. So I guess this actually gets way back. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and obviously Senator McConnell is just, he's a mainstay of Kentucky politics. I mean, he really is, next to probably Henry Clay, the most consequential politician in Kentucky's history. And obviously, everybody is on the political spectrum, and they have their varying views of Senator McConnell's politics. But I think what nobody can deny is the impact he has had on the state and on the nation. And so when I was an undergrad, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to pursue politics versus law. And so I had an opportunity to intern at his office in Washington, D.C. And we'll talk about this, but I really did believe that I wanted to live full-time in D.C., whether in politics or law. And so I went to his office as a summer intern. I remember, it was a great summer. I learned a lot, got to see a lot of great people. I remember General Colin Powell came and spoke to us. We got to see Senator John McCain. Senator Arlen Specter. I mean, it was a fabulous, and not just to us personally, but to all the Senate interns. And it was just such a great summer. And as I'm, leaving the office, right, it was between my junior and senior years of college. There wasn't an official offer on the table to join his staff, so I don't want to overstate it, but there was talk about there was going to be a legislative assistant opening in his staff doing agribusiness. And was I potentially interested? And again, job wasn't offered. But I ended up I had a lot of people saying, "Oh, you should totally go and do this and like take a couple of years off before you go to law school." Because I knew I wanted to go to law school at that time. And so the question was, do I go and join his staff full time and kind of take a hiatus on law school, or do I go to law school? And really, um, to the chagrin of my mentor at Michigan at the time, I just said, I really want to go to law school. Like, this is what really excites me right now. And, there are very, very viable reasons for delaying going to law school. And I think that there's a lot to be gained by the years that you can spend in between. But I felt ready at the time. And so I ended up not pursuing that position, jumping straight into law school. And here we are. So that's, Senator McConnell has a very, very, very big family in terms of his former staffers. And I'm honored to be one of them, even as a very, 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 very junior member.
No, I mean, I gotta say that the decision to go to law school and not join his staff blows my mind, honestly, just because of all the name dropping you just did. I mean, John McCain, Colin Pat, like that's crazy. But it's a perfect leeway. And to my logical next question here is simply put, Andrew, why'd you go to law school? You talked about it a little bit, but go into more deeper detail of why exactly you decided not to join Mitch McConnell, but instead go to Vanderbilt Law School.
Yeah, so I the first thing I ever remember wanting to be was an NBA player. I quickly realized by the age of, I think, 5 or 6, that that was not going to be in my future. I then wanted to be or not a college, a professional, or a sports, a play-by-play uh, commentator. And I still think that that would be the neatest job, or just something in sports. I'm a big college sports fan. Um, that didn't seem very practical. And so beginning in middle school, I started participating in Kentucky in speech and debate. And I enjoyed it very much. Um, I just enjoyed public speaking. I enjoyed debating, and I've always been interested in reading and writing, even dating back to, again, my middle school age. I mean, really elementary school, I loved to read. And so by the time I got to high school, I thought, I'm probably going to go to law school. Right? This is what I want to do. Now, of course, at that time, right, I'm thinking, my favorite TV show, law TV show at the time, and frankly, it still is today, is like The Law and Order with Jack McCoy, and I thought this is what all lawyers are like, right? And this is what I'm going to do. And that's not what I do now. And we'll talk about that. But this is what I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. It just seemed so great. And so, once I got to college, like I really knew my path, right? Like I kind of came in knowing that this was a direction I wanted to go down. Now, whether it was going to be using my law degree for a career in politics versus just the pure practice of law, that I didn't know. Um, but there are a lot of people who they don't know whether or not they want to go into law school, which I think is much more normal than my circumstance, which is like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And again, with with working in DC and for Senator McConnell, it was a fantastic summer. And I think that there would have been so much I could have gained maybe part of it was just impatience, right? That I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was really, really ready to get going. And I was, it was in terms of my applications to law school, right? I had found this home at Vanderbilt that when I went to visit, I mean, I distinctly recall visiting Vandy the summer. I was on the wait list there. I hadn't gotten in, and just feeling like this place is amazing. I really want to be here. It just felt like home. And so like I pushed for that. And so it's again, you can look, it's not a decision I recommend for everybody that is going straight through. In fact, I think that for most people, it's probably not the right choice. It was the right choice for me though.
Well, it's what we talk about all the time on this podcast, that there is no straight path. There's only your unique journey. So if you need that year, you take that year. But Andrew, you
Yeah.
clearly ready to go, ready for law school. And to go back to your initial point, I as well remember when my hoop dreams died.
Yeah.
It was a little farther on. It's probably like eighth grade. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm probably not going to do this basketball thing. But and the sport and the announcing thing, it is a neat job. That would be a very neat job.
So there were times, and I'm sure we'll talk about law school, but when your first year of law school, I think for most people is the most stressful time because it's a brand new way of learning things, or it certainly was for me. And I remember feeling so stressed out studying for finals that first semester and taking walks around Vanderbilt's campus and thinking, maybe I should drop out and just like become an intern. Like, how can I get an internship on college game day? Like that's what I should do. And then again, the practical side of me kicked in and just said, just, stick to where you are. There's still a part of me, right, that there's still that little part that I'm like, this would be so neat to just go and do again. Like I would have loved to just fetch water for Corso and Herb Street and all of them. But here I am instead.
No, I mean, I remember going to the Basketball Hall of Fame when I was in like fifth grade, and they have like the sort of like you could do your own play-by-play of like it was like the old Celtics, like really, really old, like the 60s, and you could like do the play-by-play on it. It was like the last play of the game when Sam Joe stole it. And I just remember sitting there, I was like, oh, this would be fun. And then I was like, yeah, that's not.
Yeah, it's really nerdy. I used to when I was I remember being 6 and 7 years old, and I had this will date me, but I had a Sega Genesis, right? And it would have been probably Bulls versus Celtics or whatever or they used to call the NBA game. It was whoever was in the finals that year. I mean, this is like an old school. I don't actually think that they had the players' names under because I don't think the cartridge could hold the memory for all the players' names. But I was so sports obsessed. I would wake up every morning and watch Sports Center before the bus took me to school. And so I just memorized all these players' names. So Nate, I would play the game, and I would do this for basketball. I know I did it for baseball too. And as I'm playing, I would just call it myself, like I'm just talking to myself, as a 6 or 7 year old. And so there's the confession that your listeners get to hear. That's what I used to do as a 6 and 7 year old. Was I played video games and talked to myself.
Andrew, are you prepared? I can one up you right now.
Yeah.
I get the one up. Like literally like sixth, seventh grade, I used to play Madden. I'd play franchise mode. I'd have my whole franchise. I'd get my headset, like my mic headset to talk to my friends. I'd get a piece of paper and I'd act like I'm calling plays. It
Oh,
gets
that's great.
it's peak nerdiness, but you know it is
Yeah,
this time of my life. But
definitely.
back on track here.
Sure.
Vanderbilt University Law School. You talked about the first year of school being stressful. You already said that before, and I love talking about the first year. So, how was the experience for you? Some people hate it, some people love it. How was it for you?
No, I mean, it was like on the whole, it was great. I look back at my 3 years of law school, and they were three of the best years of my life. They were certainly challenging years intellectually, especially for me compared to undergraduate. Not that I thought, not that undergraduate was a walk in the park, but in terms of the seriousness which I took law school compared to undergrad, it was just very different. And again, I had a good mentor at the University of Michigan, which is where I went to undergrad, who basically told me this is what you need to do. He was at the time, he was the general counsel of U of M, and he taught he taught some courses at the law school. He also taught some law courses to undergraduates, and that's how I got to know him. And so I really just followed what he told me, which was like, you've got to study really hard and you've got to make good grades. And he had pushed me, and I mean, even before I left Michigan to start at Vandy, he's like, you're going to graduate and you need to go clerk for a federal judge, and this is what you need to do to make that happen. And I just thought, okay, well, this is what I have to do. But to get back kind of to your question, so I mean, that first year is tough, right? Because in some ways you're reading a foreign language, just, kind of legal writing, judicial opinions, briefs. It's just not a normal way of talking. And certainly I think that it's gotten better over time in terms of the readability of opinions and briefs. But like, very few people would be like, it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm in bed and I'm going to go read a legal opinion, right? Like, that just, it's not what you do. And so it takes some time, right, to just kind of understand what you're reading, right? And then also understand what it is you need to focus on. And that just takes time and experience. And so, that first semester, right, it's the hardest one, because this is, at least again, for me, it was all brand new. And then the second semester was, slightly easier. And then, kind of as you go on and on, right, it becomes easier and easier and easier. The great thing about Vandy is, it was a small school by at least law school standards. I had less than 170 classmates. We knew everybody. It was very, very collegial, which is one of the reasons I picked it. It just had this reputation of people come here wanting a kind of nicer, friendlier law school experience. They're not people trying to one up each other. That was very important to me. And so I made such good friends when I was there, and I had great professors too. And so even though that first year was definitely stressful, like on the whole, it was still a very positive experience. And certainly living in Nashville, Nashville has blown up in terms of its popularity since I was in school there. It's not like it was some sleepy town when I lived there, but when I go back, it's parts of it are just unrecognizable. But it was a fun place to live.
Of course, I've seen the videos. It's definitely a place that's been blown up, definitely more popular. I know a lot of people that I know have been traveling down there a lot more, so that's always nice. But just like your mentor told you, you got to get that law clerkship. You did indeed go on to get that law clerkship. You were summer law clerk at the U.S. Department of Justice at the Office of Legal Policy. So I have to ask, how was that experience? What did you learn from it? Was it positive? Was it negative? What came from it?
Oh my gosh, it was great. So again, I wanted to be in Washington, D.C. I wanted to work for the Department of Justice, the main Department of Justice. And I happened to get this, an interview for an internship, at this, it's called the Office of Legal Policy, and it's actually, it's more of, it varies, I think, slightly from administration to administration, kind of what that office, what their priorities are, and what they do. I was there at the tail end of the George W. Bush administration. And so when I was there in 2008, kind of, I would characterize their two main things as vetting of potential federal judges. So before, and this would happen before they were nominated, so that, there would be, for example, we would hear, Nate Crespo is going to be nominated, or we're thinking of nominating Nate Crespo to the district bench in, the Northern District of New York. But the president doesn't want to be embarrassed if there's something in Nate's past. Not that there would be anything in your past that would be embarrassing. And so before the nomination would ever come out to the public, right, there would be this, kind of background process, right, in terms of interviews, vetting, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you kind of clear that hurdle, once OLP kind of cleared it, then it would go to the White House, and the nomination would become official. So I got to see that side of it, which is really neat. And then also, I got to do, just kind of the legislative priorities, right, of the department, legislative as well as, I guess, some regulatory too. So it's more, it wasn't necessarily about, kind of, none of them are litigating cases, but they're shaping the law. When I was there, when I was a summer law clerk at OLP, it was 2008, and the big U.S. Supreme Court decision that year was United States versus Heller, which was a Second Amendment case, the main one that kind of held that the Second Amendment establishes an individual right to bear and possess firearms regardless of militia status, which was a change in terms of how it was. And so I remember that opinion coming out, and we were tasked, at my office with kind of what are the ramifications, of this. And I mean, we're still dealing with it. I mean, there was a major decision last week, Rahimi from the U.S. Supreme Court on the Second Amendment, and so it was just it was great work, fabulous people, just, I mean, top-notch people working there, both on the political side, right, the political appointee side, as well as on the career side. Just all around amazing people. It was such a great summer. And then I was in a small office with three other interns, and they were great too. So it was such a neat summer.
I have to ask. I'm sure you went through a lot of the vetting of the judges. You did some research into them. Were there any judges you came across that are like really famous now, or no?
No, I mean, I recall being involved with two come to mind, two who are now federal district judges. But no, they, and they're, as far as I know, they're very well reputed people, but they're not necessarily the, kind of the household names. But I'm sure we'll talk about it. But it was that summer, right? That was kind of it was that summer that kind of was the main hook for the judicial clerkships that I got following graduation. Like, but for that summer and the connections I made that summer, I'm sure maybe I would have gotten a judicial clerkship. I don't know, but I can trace my clerkships to what I did that summer. Not the work, right? Not the kind of the legal work I did, but the people I connected with and I did work for.
Well, we'll dive into that. I love talking about networking, one of my favorite things in the world. So can you talk about the importance of networking, how important it's been for your career?
Oh my God.
I
No, go
just
ahead.
like
Sorry.
to say as well, usually when I see experiences, a lot of jumping around, I always make the prediction that all these experiences are connected in some way, shape, or form. But you beat me to my prediction, but it's totally all right. So talk
Yeah.
about the networking.
Yeah. I mean, everything. Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, there are, kind of, there are connections, I think, with all of the jobs that I've had. In fact, probably the least amount of connections that I've had is probably my current job. It was more, I mean, my experiences led me to my current job, but not the people. It is critical. I tell law students, especially those who are seeking judicial clerkships, which is what I get asked a lot about. I say it's not a true meritocracy. It can't be, because you have a federal judge who is getting, let's say, 100 applications, right, for If they're a district judge, maybe 2 to 3 positions. If they're a circuit judge, 4 positions, right? Again, whichever way you want to cut it, right? That's not a lot of positions and a large amount of applications. And that number can be a lot higher. How is that judge going to decide? I mean, that judge can't interview all 100 people, right? So you're first going to slice it down. I mean, I can't speak for, I'm not a judge, I can't speak for them, but what, as I understand it, right, is, you kind of look at it and you can say, well, these 50 people don't meet kind of the basic criteria, right? And so there's your meritocracy part of it, right? Their GPA isn't what I want it to be. Maybe I want them to be on law review, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So then let's say that cuts it down to 50. Now, all 50 of these people are perfectly well qualified for these 2 to 4 positions. So what happens next, right? Again, the judge, I don't know of any judge who will interview 50 people. They don't have the time or the desire to do that. Now, maybe they'll interview 10 or more, but then how do you get from that 50 to 10, right? It's like, and how can you tell it? How can you tell these applications apart? I mean, again, there might be something on that person's resume that sticks out, right? Like for me, when I was applying, being from Kentucky, right? Like Kentucky federal judges reach out because that's a natural connection. But what happens more often than not, right, is one of your recommenders says, I know this judge, I know this person, and I'm happy to make a call to this person on your behalf. And, that means a lot, because if that judge trusts that person, right, they're going to, all of a sudden you have this intangible point that isn't going to come across on a resume. And especially for judicial chambers where it's a monastic lifestyle, whether you're at the appellate or the district court level, and you're working in this very, very, very small team, where having one bad apple can make for a bad experience for everybody for that year. And fortunately, both of my years, it was great. But, a lot of times when I'm talking, when I make recommendations to judges now of law students, it's not just that I'm saying this person's very smart and will do a great job. Yes, I am saying that, but then I'm also like, they're a really good person. Like, I enjoy being with them, and I think you will too. And that personality fit is important. So for both of the judges I clerked for, I had, connections. My boss at the Office of Legal Policy, Beth Collins, who's now in-house at Walmart. She was the assistant attorney general at the time. And we just, through work that summer, I just happened to, strike up a good mentoring relationship with her just organically. It wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened that I was doing work for her, and we just got along really well. And, she had clerked after law school, and she knew I wanted to clerk. And so, she was said, here are some people I could put you in touch with, or that I could reach out to. And so she had connections to both of my judges. In fact, the judge in Houston, which brought me here, she clerked for her. And similarly, some of my professors had connections to some of the judges I clerked for. Networking is just, it's essential. I don't say do it for just like the sake of professional gain, right? Do it, for other reasons, because it's just, you enjoy being with other people too, and meeting others and learning about them. But certainly, like, it does have those benefits that come with it. And I definitely would not be in the positions I've had over time, but for networking.
Andrew, I can tell that you are a fantastic public speaker because you wrapped up that answer. You brought it all back to the beginning. It was so beautifully done. You said so many powerful things. Something you said at the beginning that was so, so powerful is that it's not a true meritocracy, that as much as you could have the best grades in the world and you could have all the best experiences, that you need some sort of in most of the time to get most of the positions. Maybe not all the time, not 100% of the time, but it's just that more important point that you gotta be networking, you gotta be out there, you gotta be genuine about it. Like you said, you don't want to make it too transactional. Like I'm just here
Correct.
for you to help me.
Right.
I'm not gonna give you anything. Like that's not great. But moving on from all that, moving on from networking, switching gears a little bit. So you had your two law clerkships, one at the Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, the other one at the Southern District of Texas. Then you were an associate at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, which was actually stemming from a summer associateship there in your time at
Correct.
law school. And then you then went on to be an assistant United States attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas. Now, with all that being said, I have to ask, when did your sort of appellate want, that need to do appellate litigation sprout within all these experiences? And how did you sort of figure out this is what I want to do and this is what is best for me?
It is, I mean, that's a great question. And it's something I like to talk to law students and younger lawyers about who are considering a career in appellate litigation, because appellate litigation is a very specialized practice. I mean, it is, again, we talked about Jack McCoy, right? Jack McCoy was my favorite, um, and still is my favorite TV attorney. And I said, imagine Jack McCoy now, like this is describing what I do. Imagine Jack McCoy in his office, for 8 to 10 hours a day on Westlaw, writing on Microsoft Word, and then reading briefs, and then occasionally going to court and talking to some judges about the law. Like it's a lot different, right? It is a lot different from what you see on TV, and it's a lot different from what my colleagues, at my current firm, who are all trial lawyers, with the exception of the members of my team, do. And so I think it's important to be intentional about what it is you want to pursue and why. And so again, in law school, I thought once I learned about appellate litigation in law school, I thought that that's what I wanted to do. And the reason was because I just really enjoyed reading and writing. I did mock trial my 1L year. And although I had a great partner, I didn't really I didn't enjoy the experience that much. Like I just didn't get that much out of it as compared to moot court, right? When you're just arguing about the law, that I really enjoyed. And so to fast forward, and so that's one of the reasons why I was a summer associate at Gibson Dunn, and why I targeted them um, as a law student was they had and still have a fantastic appellate practice. And I'm like, I just want to learn from the best of the best because I think that this might be what I want to do. But, and this is the thing. So, but I made a series of decisions to kind of test that assumption. The first was one of the reasons I clerked, I clerked first for a court of appeals judge, and then I clerked for a district judge. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to see more what was trial litigation like. And again, clerking for a federal district judge level and the work is, can be very appellate like in nature, but it is still a different experience than clerking at the circuit court of appeals level. And then when I got to Gibson, one of the things I liked about Gibson, and I think they still have it, is they market themselves to associates as we have a quote a free market practice, right? You are not assigned to a practice group. You are assigned to like litigation or M&A or tax, but that's it. And what you do within that is completely up to the associate. Like it's on the associate to fill those hours. I like that. And so what I did when I got to Gibson, and again, because I what I wasn't sure about was, did I like appellate litigation because it was something that truly interested me and I was good at it? Or did I want to do appellate litigation because that's what I was comfortable doing, right? Because in law school, right, the majority of classes you're taking, you're just reading cases and you're arguing, about the case's meanings. Like that's what appellate lawyers do. So it was, do I want to do this just because I'm just comfortable doing it? And so when I got to Gibson again, I intentionally structured my practice where I was able to do 50% with the appellate practice and 50% just general commercial litigation, working with great trial lawyers there and seeing that side of the practice, discovery, depositions, pretrial practice. And it was through that, right? It was through doing that. And it was similar to my mock trial experience, which was, it wasn't a negative experience, the general commercial lit. It was good. And in fact, I really loved the people I worked with in that practice. But I just didn't get the same level of enjoyment out of the work that I did doing appellate work. And so that's when I was there, right? Within that first year, I realized, no, I really want to do appellate litigation full time, not because I'm comfortable doing it, but it really is because like that is what calls to me. That is what I get the most enjoyment out of. And so, kind of that led to the next position at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I was able to, kind of turn what was a 50% practice, into a 100% practice.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you said there, that you get enjoyment from it. That is something you enjoy doing and you get great satisfaction from. And that is typically one of the most important things that anyone could do when they're looking to start a job in any industry ever, is that if you get enjoyment from the work that you do, well, that's the greatest thing in the world, isn't it?
Right.
That's what you do every day. Now, I have a question, because you said the word very much a while ago, and I wrote it down and I forgot to ask. What does monastic mean?
Oh, that's what, like, well, it stems from being a monk, right? Like just being solitary. So, I
Oh,
mean, because in a judicial chambers, right? I mean, you're not, and it's more true at the court of appeals level than at the trial court level, because at least at the trial court level, you might have hearings every day or every other day. So you're seeing lawyers at least across the bench. But, on your day-to-day basis, right? Like you're coming to work and it's you, it's the judge, it's your fellow law clerks, which again, like when I was with Judge Rosenthal in Houston, there was, well, she had we had one other kind of regular law clerk, and then she had a special law clerk who helped with her rules committee work. So just the two of us, her case manager and her judicial assistant, really, really small. And so it's quiet, right? I mean, you're just kind of working by yourself or just as part of this small team. And frankly, I mean, that kind of, and that's true for appellate work more generally, right? I mean, my work is very monastic. I'm talking with colleagues on a day-to-day basis, but I am not, unlike my trial colleagues, right? I'm not traveling to depositions every day or mediations or trials, right? I'm working. And so it's being a judge and working in the chambers, it's a very monastic lifestyle. So was being an appellate lawyer, which again gets back to the reason of be intentional if you want to pursue appellate litigation, because it's also from a temperamental standpoint, right? Some people need a lot more action, and this is just way too boring. And I totally get it. I totally understand. What's the right decision for me is not the right decision, for everybody or even a majority of people. It's such an individualized decision.
it's such a unique journey. Sorry, I had to say it. I had to say
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I'm always I'm just a bit of a word nerd, so I had to
No,
know that stuff. And speaking of being a nerd, I also, speaking of your time in moot court, I actually sometimes watch moot court in my free time, which is just not great. But you are now an appellate attorney. You are also the head of the appellate practice at Arnold Itkin. So can you talk about that experience? How is it? Are you loving it? I would think so. And what does the future look like for Andrew at Arnold and Itkin?
Yeah, no, it's great. So I came over. So I, how I got to Arnold, and so I had spent about 7 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office as an appellate prosecutor, right? But on the criminal side, so I was doing exclusively federal criminal appeals in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and then some kind of post-conviction work at the trial court level, and then helping some of our trial prosecutors with kind of thorny legal issues that might come up with their trial. But predominantly that. And as I was thinking of leaving to return to private practice, um, I got a call out of the blue from a legal recruiter about the position I now have. And and he explained that he was working for a law firm, or had been retained by a law firm that was, a plaintiff's law firm that was interested in, that had traditionally hired outside counsel for all of their appeals. And they were interested in creating a small appellate practice and bringing it in-house. And they were looking for somebody who could create that. And the recruiter had gotten my name, kind of from somebody else, right, who didn't even know that I was thinking of leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office. I tell people, and my bosses, I don't know if they'll listen to this, but they can hear it. I remember that call and thinking, when I talked to the recruiter, I thought it was crazy. Like, I just thought I had never heard of a plaintiff's law firm, especially one that specializes in catastrophic personal injury, and some mass torts, as having an appellate practice. Like, this doesn't exist. But I always tell young lawyers and law students, don't turn down a conversation, right? And I said, well, if that's the advice I give to them, I should follow it myself. And so I had a conversation, and I just walked away, and I'm like, well, this sounds really interesting, right? It just kind of, I have a bit of an entrepreneurial streak, and I'm just like, the idea of appellate practice isn't new, right? What I do is not unique, but creating something in this sphere that didn't exist was just like, it just really stood out to me. And so, kind of, as the talks went on, and eventually one thing led to the other, and in March of 21, I officially came aboard. It's been great. It was, it was certainly, though, like drinking from a fire hose, because again, I remember telling one of the two partners this in kind of one of our final conversations, and I think they had already extended me the job at this point, and I said, I am a federal criminal appellate attorney, but you want to hire me to do all civil appeals, and predominantly on the state side, where I don't have experience. And he's like, yep, that's exactly right. And I'm like, well, if you're willing to accept the risk, that comes with that, then, caveat emptor. And so it was, really, while the tools, right, of being an appellate lawyer, they, being a good researcher, being a good writer, right, that's universal, right? It just kind of carries over from one field of law to the next. In fact, what makes a good appellate lawyer, I think, is the ability to be a very good generalist, to go from one area to the others, to just simplify things, to judges who are also generalists. But, coming in and not having practiced, having exclusively practiced in the Fifth Circuit, and now all of a sudden I am, the majority of my practice is in the Texas state courts. There are new rules to learn, both written and unwritten rules. And, I have just learned so much from it. I've, been fortunate to have great people. The Texas appellate bar is a fabulous bar. I mean, just really great, really smart people. and they don't have to be on the same side of the V as you, right? In fact, I've got many friends, and probably the majority of them who are on the opposite side, right? Because they're representing, corporate clients, which we don't do. But all of them are, willing to give advice and to help, and they did, kind of as I made the transition. And so kind of, since that time, right? I mean, it started, it was just me in March of 21. And then we added a legal assistant, and then we added an appellate attorney, later that year. And then we, a couple months ago, just added another appellate attorney to our team. And so, what I say is we're small but mighty. Or I like to think I can objectively say we're small. Whether we're mighty, I suppose, somebody else can say. I think we are. We have a great team, and we try to do great work. And so it's very interesting work. And we, again, we represent what I think is a traditionally underrepresented populace at the appellate level. Plaintiffs certainly have great representation at the trial level, but I think that once it gets up to the Court of Appeals level, it can vary wildly in terms of quality, especially if, in many cases, the trial lawyer who is not versed at all in appellate litigation is handling it. And what I like to think that what we try to do, right, is, I mean, obviously we're trying to win every case that we have, but above all, right, I mean, kind of the goal is like to just keep a level playing field, right? This is what I tell judges, which is that my goal is I just want to make sure that you get good briefing on both sides, because because that leads to a better decision, or it should lead to a better decision, a more reasoned decision. Because if you get, a great brief from one party and a horrible brief from another party, one that is indecipherable, what do you do? Right? I mean, that judge is just left with one side's recitation. And then the judge is certainly going to go off and do her own research, right? But it's not as good as if both parties are coming with quality briefing, and then the judge goes off and based on that, does her own research. So I don't know if that answers your questions. It's been great. I mean, it's been really neat to build this over 3 years, and I work with great people here. They've been very supportive of what I do, even though, again, aside from the three of us, the 20 plus other attorneys, they are pure trial lawyers, and they're the best in the business. But it's kind of like I don't know, this might be a reference that many listeners don't understand, but it's like a men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing, where we don't necessarily sometimes understand one another, but we do the best that we can.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablassers.com today and enroll in the law school operating system. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, Andrew, with the enthusiasm that you're speaking with about how excited you are to continue building this stuff. I mean, you're filling a void in the market too. There's so much going on, and I just love to hear it because you seem to be, you enjoy it a lot. You enjoy what you do a lot. And that is one of the most important takeaways that people should take away from you speaking about your job, is that you enjoy it more than anything. And that's a wonderful thing. But Andrew, we're down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is what I've seen throughout the entirety of this podcast, of going through these episodes, is that the law seems to be moving in a certain direction, that people are adopting new technologies, maybe their AI, maybe their software, whatever they may be. This is more or less, per se, the tech stack question. So what does your tech stack look like? What sort of recommendations do you have for people out there who may be looking to cut that overhead, be more efficient, so on and so forth?
Sure. Well, the short version is I'm still working on that. I have, I adopted back at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I went to an iPad for all of my reading and record. I don't do. I will print off briefs sometimes and take notes, and especially if I'm editing. But I think generally a lot of lawyers still print off records and they're reading, and I'm just all electronic or predominantly electronic. When I go to an oral argument, for example, right, I get to carry a very, very small briefcase because it is just my iPad, because my iPad has the entire record in it. So if I'm sitting at counsel table during an argument, watching my opponent argue, and some record issue comes up, right, I can just instantly pop it out and look in there. I think though what's very interesting, and what I have not yet adopted is generative AI, but it is so fascinating, right? I mean, just watching how quickly things are advancing, and the promises as well as the perils, right? I think that, I don't know, right, what exactly the future holds when it comes to AI. What I do think about, I mean, as recently as, I texted a colleague last night an article I saw on a legal technology blog about a 2,000 person law firm that just rolled out a firm-wide version of one of the AI programs, and just all the processes they did. And I'm so interested by that, because I don't want to be left behind, right? I mean, because ultimately other people are going to be using it. And I don't want to be a dinosaur. I don't want to be stuck in my ways. Like I want to adapt. I want to do so responsibly and ethically. And that's really important. In fact, the Fifth Circuit just had a big debate about whether to adopt a rule on generative AI. I actually submitted a comment on it because it was of interest to me. And so I would expect it to become at some point a part of my practice. I need to figure out kind of what it is and how it can best suit me. But one other final story, and sorry for making a long question, but my friend Rafi Melkonian, so we just had last Friday was the State Bar of Texas annual convention. And so there were a bunch of CLEs. I spoke there to provide a Fifth Circuit update. Rafi, who's a fabulous appellate lawyer here in Houston, he and another friend spoke on ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT for lawyers. And he had a LinkedIn post about it. It was a very great LinkedIn post. I took that LinkedIn post, I went to Claude AI, and I said, here is the post that my friend wrote. Please write me a response praising him, on a job well done on this. And it spit it out. And I said, Rafi, great job on your chat GPT. Here is what it told me to say to you in response. And I posted, and it's fascinating to me. Again, I'm not saying, use it and upload client data and secrets and everything. You've got to do so responsibly and ethically, but it's coming, and I don't want to be left behind.
Of course. I mean, I love me some generative AI. I gotta be honest. I've known about it for years now. I've been following ChatGPT for a while, and I sometimes I'll just sit on my computer and I'll just start talking to it and see what it says. A lot of the times I'll start debating it, and I'll be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what about this?" I'm like, "Aren't you assuming this?" And they're like, "No, I'm an AI. I can't."
When ChatGPT, I mean, I don't think it was when it was first released to the public, but when it started getting news, and so I signed up for an account, and I was just playing around with it, and I was having it. I was just like, tell me the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but set it to the Star Wars universe. And it was just unbelievable, like what it came out with. And then I remember, and I think have it right in the history, which was, now tell me the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but set it to property law, like a property law dispute. And it did it. And I'm just like, this is so wild. It's kind of scary. And maybe I'll be replaced eventually by C3PO, but we're not there yet.
No, unfortunately not. Another funny thing that I thought is me imagining in my head you sitting there at the table getting ready for trial with your iPad. I just think that is the craziest thing because like I've seen like Law and Order before, I've watched Moot Court before, and just imagine you sitting there with your iPad just getting right to work. I think it's the greatest thing ever. I love it so much. But fourth to last question here. Live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Andrew, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just something that you love reading, something in the past that you've loved reading, something you'd give a gift to someone, so on and so forth.
Wow, what a great question. I think it's, especially if you're just because this is a legal podcast, what I will say is it is very important to not just read like legal books or legal briefs or opinions. Like, you need to have in your diet, whether it's good fiction, nonfiction, good newspapers, right, that are known for having quality writing, um, you know, um, newspapers or magazines, right, like the New Yorker. Um, Again, people might view it and they say, well, it has a political bent to it. What I'll say is it actually has just the quality of the writing is amazing, is excellent. And I think you can find that like in The Economist as well, the Wall Street Journal, just reading things outside. Um, I will, I have I tend to read things on my Kindle. I have a Kindle that just because I can carry so many books. And there's a great website that I don't know if I should plug it, but somehow it found its way into my Gmail, and they send me an email every morning with discounted ebooks. And I will, for $1 or $2, and these can be Pulitzer Prize winning books sometimes. And so if something stands out at me, I'll read it. Right now I'm reading Upton Sinclair's Oil, just because it came out. Like, it was one of the ones that was featured, and I'm like, I've never read this, but Upton Sinclair is a fantastic writer, and so I'm enjoying it. Because it is. But I will say, for people who are interested in books about legal writing, the one I tell people is probably the best is Brian Garner's The Winning Brief, which I have right here at my credenza. It's a 600-page book on all different aspects of brief writing, and it's all very useful. Like, all of it, it's all worth reading. What I tell people is the best part of that book, in my opinion, is the first 120-ish pages, the first part of the book, because it talks about the process of writing. And I think that part gets overlooked so much when it comes to legal writing, because people are often thinking about, how can I have this one good one-liner or this one zinger or so on and so forth. The best brief, in my opinion, is not necessarily the flashiest brief. In fact, a lot of times it's not going to be the flashiest brief. It is the brief that's the easiest to understand. And Garner's first part of the book is just about how the process of writing and thinking logically and writing logically. And it's great. I did a CLE where my tips were just really adapted from that, because I just think it's fantastic. So that's a great book. Ross Guberman's books, Point Made, Point Taken, they're also very good books. I would say I describe those as kind of like, I describe Garner's The Winning Brief in that first 120 pages like legal writing 101. Right, like this is what you need as the basic building blocks. And then Guberman's stuff is like 201, because now it's like, now you've got the basics of how to build things, and now here's how you can build style into it.
Well, those are great recommendations. And I'd have to say the first one really threw me for a whirl. I haven't heard the name Upton Sinclair since like 8th grade, to be
I
honest.
know.
So I was,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I get this email every day. They know me, and I'm a very, apparently I'm a good customer, because I see something, I see a blurb, and it's like, oh, this sounds like it's an interesting book, and it's only 99 cents or $1.99. So I download it, and then I just start plowing through books. And generally, even if I don't like a book, I'll probably, if I start something, I'll probably finish it. But it's a really well written book. He's just a very vivid writer,
of course.
and I think that's just really helpful for my own practice.
Of course. So, third to last question here, Andrew. What are the sorts of things you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, any podcasts you listen to? What is crossing the transom of Andrew's mind on a daily basis?
Not really involved in social media. I am involved in LinkedIn, which I do for professional purposes, and sometimes I think it's obnoxious on my end, not on others, on just kind of the things that you post, but it is necessary. I have tried to get away more from other forms of social media. I used to have an Instagram account, but more just like because I would just find myself mindlessly scrolling, and I didn't want to do that. I have a Twitter account, but I don't have, like, I really don't look at it that much. There's a couple people that if I'm curious, I might just get on my laptop and see what they're saying. So, LinkedIn is really the only social media I use. I listen to podcasts all the time. Whenever I'm driving, right? I'm probably listening to a podcast. They are generally about college sports and college football in particular, which is my favorite sport. So what do I listen to? Split Zone Duo. Um, Split Zone Duo, The Solid Verbal. And these are both of them are independent kind of, podcast companies, but they just do great work, and you subscribe. I think they have free episodes, but I pay their Substack, $10 a month, and it's well worth it. Shut Down Fullcast, which is more of a satire football one, so that's great. Because I am a legal nerd, I do listen to a couple legal podcasts. There is Advisory Opinions, which is from the Dispatch, and I would describe it as a it's hosted by two, probably more on the conservative side of the legal spectrum, but very, very informed. I think that they are very neutral in how they come across in their descriptions of the cases, and what's going on. I just think it's so informative. It's a great one. And then the other one that I am thinking of, I think it's called Divided Argument, by two law professors, Dan Epps and Will Bode, who are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and they're former U.S. Supreme Court clerks, and they'll talk about what's going on at the U.S. Supreme Court. And then again, because I'm a nerd, I will have a subscription to oya.org, puts all the U.S. Supreme Court oral arguments on a podcast feed. I do not listen to all of them. In fact, I do not listen to a majority of them. But if there are certain cases that I am interested in, right, I do listen to those, just because I'm interested in the topic, and because listening to others, right, helps me to improve my own oral advocacy skills, hearing what others do. So sports and law, which kind of goes back to the beginning, right, about college game day and being in law school, right? It combines both of those things.
Admittedly, I myself have also listened to Supreme Court arguments before,
Yeah.
and I actually find it very, very fascinating the way that they operate, the way that they speak to the attorneys, like the way that they kind of like brush off each other sometimes, like they kind of work off each other. Sometimes they get into little fights. I enjoy watching it. But second to last question here, Andrew, a little switch of gears, but you're working there at Arnold Itkin. You got all that going on. You're heading the appellate group. But what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Andrew?
Oh my gosh, an ideal Friday night. Well, I have three young boys who are 7, almost 5, and 2 months.
Oh my God.
So things are pretty loud at home right now. So the ideal Friday night is there's no work emergency, there's no emergency appeal, so that's good. The kids are all calm and maybe they're tucked into bed, and I am with my wife and our 2 Boston Terriers on our couch, propped up, watching probably we don't watch many movies, to be honest, but we stream a lot of TV, and so just watching something to, just almost like escapism. That is the ideal. Like the Friday night is the ideal. I will say, and I'll give them a plug, we are very involved with the Houston Symphony here in Houston. We have a world-class symphony here, and that is my wife and I go to probably anywhere from, I would say, 12 to 18 concerts a year. And that's our date night. And we don't do that on a Friday night. That's a Saturday night. But we love the Houston Symphony. And if they ever since COVID, they began live streaming their concerts. So if any of your listeners are interested, you don't have to be in Houston to watch them. Sunday morning is after having a leisurely, my morning coffee and everything, going out for a 2 to 3 hour bike ride. That's I do for my exercise. I love cycling, both indoor and outdoor, but on the weekends, that's when I can really do my long ride.
I love to hear that. I love the long bike rides, and I'd love to hear the symphony. You said, for the listeners who are Andrew, I'm interested in live streaming the Houston Symphony. I love classical music a lot. I've been doing a lot of soul searching the past couple of weeks. I've been listening to a lot of new stuff, getting into a lot of new classical music. Beethoven's always my favorite, specifically the Ninth Symphony. I mean, you can't get enough of that stuff. That
Right.
stuff like just gets me going. I can run through a wall or something after listening to that, which is usually like, I don't know, usually people are calmed by it. I'm more very hyped up. But
Yeah.
Final question here, Andrew. I do this at the end of every single episode. What are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
What words of wisdom? Oh my gosh. That is a tough question. I would say the and this is probably more, I mean, I think it's universally applicable, but it's more for law students and younger lawyers. Kind of like um the two kind of phrases I kind of try to live by is and how I try to conduct myself is one, do good work, and two, be a good person. I think if you do those two things, right, like that's how I've always tried to live my life, especially once I started on more of the professional path, right, in law school. And I think that has, I don't know what success I've attained, but to the extent I've attained any success, I really think it goes back to just those two principles. Is that I try to do very good work, and then I try to be a good person to everybody. Even obviously in law and litigation, there's a winner and there's a loser, and you are saying this person's right and this person's wrong. But that doesn't mean that in the meantime, right? Like beyond the fact that you're advocating for your client, right? That you can't just be still overall, a good colleague, a good person to everybody in the bar in the community. So I guess if there were any words of wisdom that people wanted to listen to me about, it would be those two things.
Well, Andrew, I thought it was beautifully said, and I think it's two great principles to live by: do good work, be a good person. But Andrew, that's the podcast, that's the episode. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences, and for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyers in the making, one word, substack.com, and I will see you all in the next one.